All right, we are recording. Well, thank you everybody for being with us this morning or this evening, depending on which time zone you are in. My name is Brittany Brand. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Geosciences, and I'm the director for the Boise State Hazard and Climate Resilience Institute. We formed a couple of years ago. Our primary mission is to promote resilience to disasters and the impacts of a changing climate. And we really exist to connect across disciplines, to break down silos, to work with stakeholders at the beginning of projects, and really involve the whole community in efforts to promote community resilience. So this is a part of, well, this is actually an invited presentation tonight, and I'm gonna let Paylin introduce our speaker. But we're very pleased to have Debra, and I'll pop our website in the chat box in a few minutes. We have some new hazard pages available, so you might want to check those out. We actually posted one today on air quality, so depending on what part of the world you're in, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, we've been struggling with air quality and smoke for a few weeks now, so we've got a new page up on that, and you can learn more about the HCRI if you just explore our website, and always you can email me. So, all right, well, I will turn it over to Paylin, and looking forward to hearing the presentation.
All right, so I don't want to be too long, but welcome and thank you everyone. A few sort of housekeeping notes. We will be taking questions in the chat box. So you can see at the bottom of your screen, there's a little cartoon bubble. If you click on that, you can enter some questions. And just please go ahead and feed them in as Debra is talking. I think, we will kind of go along. If I sort of sense a good place to ask one of them, I will, but otherwise I'll just sort of hang on to those until toward the end of her presentation. For those of you who are on audio or video, because Zoom can sometimes get a little bogged down with the video. I'm going to mute myself while Debra is speaking, and so that's probably a good idea for us until we want to kind of come up and actually say something. It's good to mute the video and audio. And of course, there's pets and kids and all kinds of things that happen when you've got your audio and video going, as we were talking about. Well, it's really an honor and a pleasure to introduce Debra Efroymson tonight. Debra and I have known each other since we were teenagers in high school together, which is crazy. It's a little while ago, and I'm just super pleased and amazed to have sort of the arc of our friendship kind of bend back toward each other in this way, which is wonderful. And I want to also put a little doff of the hat to Ann Bertram, who is another friend of ours in the participants group here, who has helped maintain that connection. I'm going to just read a few words of introduction to Debra, and then I'll turn it over to her. So Debra Efroymson wears many hats. She is the regional director for the Canadian NGO HealthBridge. She's also an advisor to Work for a Better Bangladesh Trust, and co-founder and acting executive director for the Institute of Wellbeing. I think we need lots of those institutes right now. Debra has lived and worked in Asia since 1994 and is a force of nature, I think it's safe to say. Debra has written about and spoken extensively on and also mentored about issues of tobacco control, sexuality and reproductive health, urban planning, transportation policy, and economics. And if you wanted to sort of sum that up in the most basic terms, fewer cigarettes, more equity for women, greener cities, and more bikes. I think we can all kind of get behind these things. And I think they also cross a lot of these boundaries between cultures and really cross-cut a lot of the things that are going on in urban areas. In Debra's book, Beyond Apologies, Defining and Achieving an Economics of Well-Being, she addresses 13 major myths about economics, including the myth that economic growth is vital and that GDP says something meaningful about people's well-being. I'm very mindful of the tiny nation of Bhutan that actually has a sort of a gross domestic happiness index. I think they're wonderful. We should have something like this. Debra provides suggestions for a better way to look at each of these issues and ideas on activism toward these goals. The book draws on many, many years of research as well as personal experience, guiding policy-oriented research and advocacy across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Debra is fluent in many languages. I think this is something that is near and dear to my heart as an anthropologist and also as a person involved in the social sciences and in basically understanding people better and societies better. Bangla, Vietnamese, and well, I don't know how many other languages you speak, Debra,
Spanish
but
and French.
you're amazing. I bow down before you. You're an amazing scholar activist. I'm really just thrilled to give you a short introduction. Everyone, please welcome Debra, and I am going to turn the sort of table over to Debra for a really amazing and eye-opening conversation. And again, reminding you to please type your questions into the chat box when you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Pei, for that excessively flattering introduction. Now I'm a little embarrassed. I slaughter many languages, put it that way. I'm delighted to be here with you, your evening, my early morning. So if you looked at the title of the talk, Redefining Prosperity, Addressing COVID-19, the Climate Crisis, Inequality and Injustice, that sounds a bit ambitious. But it's okay, because we know that the way we go about problems is we take each one separately. We don't really worry about root causes. So how do we address COVID-19? We need masks. We're developing a vaccine. A little argument about how quickly that'll be available, but we'll get there, right? Climate crisis, super simple. We need electric cars and renewable electricity, some technology, maybe some capture of carbon with big machines. No problem, technology will solve us. Inequality, simple. We need economic growth. We just don't have enough money to go around. We will solve the problem of poverty by having more money. And injustice is the simplest one of all. We'll just pretend it doesn't exist. So that's the typical way to solve our problems. And it's based on this belief in economics as it's conventionally taught and as it's explained to us in media. So if we step back a bit and look at the logic behind that economics, the logic behind our thought process as we address these major problems throughout the world, we notice some, I would say, small issues. One thing is environment has no value. A healthy environment, a river where you can actually just dip your hands in and drink the water without getting sick, a standing forest, clean air, none of that has economic value. Health has value because it's a commodity. If you go to a doctor, to the hospital, you go to the pharmacy, you're spending money, and then it's important because it generates economic activity. But that's actually not health, it's the commodity, it's actually sickness or treatment. So being healthy does not contribute to the economy and thus has no value. So what is the highest goal in economics? We've ignored environment, we've ignored health, and what we seek is profit and specifically selfishness, greed are honored. They're up on the altar, we worship greed. Everybody should think about themselves and that will enable the economy to prosper. Tragically, apparently, Ayn Rand is read by basically every senator in the United States. So her books about the importance of greed are considered to be the basis of good economic ideas. So when we talk about economic growth, people often think, well, sure, economic growth, that means growth of jobs or growth of enough food for everybody. That's not what it means. It simply is growth of production, no matter of what. So what's left out? When we talk about growing economies, jobs are not included. Employment is something on the side, but it's not included in actually economic growth. I mentioned clean air and water, not mentioned. Health, education, basic needs, essentially left out. All we see is the importance of increasing production measured in GDP. And if we land up with more billionaires, more inequality, that's fine because that's just the natural system. I'm going to go quickly over the results. I think you're all very well aware of these without me going into great detail, but the results of our belief in all of these economic ideas, obviously the climate crisis worsens every day. Brittany was just talking about the wildfires. I'm sorry to hear you're also getting the smoke in Idaho. Here we just get floods, that's fine. We know that about 1 million plant and animal species are threatened with extinction, and we've of course lost huge numbers. The refugee crisis, why are there so many refugees? Why can't people stay in their own country? Well, a lot of it's due to climate crisis, but also due to the economic system of exploitation. And then because there's so many refugees, the natural response is to mistreat them. Makes sense? In economic inequality, gross seems like an insufficient word to describe the current level of economic inequality. Just one quick example, 8 people in the world owning as much wealth as 3.6 billion. So 8 individuals and half of the world's population have the same wealth. And that's where we're going with this lack of attention to equality. And in the United States, virtually all of the economic gains over the last few decades have gone to the very wealthy. The middle class and the poor, as you can see all around you, struggling, falling further behind. And of course, coronavirus has only made this worse. My sister-in-law was just in Denver and she was shocked by the growth in the tent cities, the number of people homeless just recently, in addition to all the people who have been homeless all this time. In the United States, total household debt, it's crazy, $14.3 trillion. It's okay, just get another credit card. Injustice, you know, I hope that the United States gets the gold medal in the world for incarceration. No other country throws as high a percentage of its population into prison as the United States. I don't know, these figures are entirely correct. Different places give you different numbers, but the last one I saw, 1 in 17 white people will go to prison in their lifetime, average. 1 in 3 if you are Black. Blacks make up 6.5% of the of the total population, 6.5% of the total population, but over 40% of the prison population. So part of the reason Blacks are doing so poorly economically in the United States, we have 400 years of all kinds of exploitation, cruelty, and more recently throwing them in prison. And then once you get out, no food stamps, no public housing, difficult to find a job. We, of course, are seeing the massive protests against the racist violence. We're also seeing the response to those protests. It's very, very hard to move forward when we don't change our basic underlying beliefs. We also know the US is by far the hardest hit in the world by COVID-19 in terms of cases, in terms of unemployment, in terms of deaths. You just take a quick glance over at our northern neighbor of Canada. I don't imagine it gets talked about much, especially on, say, Fox News. But Canada, the government, when it saw what was happening, said, okay, we don't want people losing their jobs, so we will pay employers to keep their staff hired even if they cannot go to work. So they had basically no unemployment as a result of COVID-19. They've also had very few cases or deaths because they have a competent and caring government. So all of this was essentially unnecessary, certainly to the level. But beyond that, even within accepting that somehow the US had to lose 200,000 people to COVID-19, it's okay because they're all people of color in blue states. But you know, even beyond that, when I was watching some of the news and all of these programs were saying, okay, we need more charity. We need to donate masks to health workers. We need to feed children because they're not in school. And I'm sitting here in Bangladesh watching Trevor Noah and maybe Stephen Colbert pleading for charity to the poor affected by COVID-19. I'm thinking, isn't the United States the wealthiest country in the world? And can't the government afford a response? Why is it up to individuals and charity? Who was it, Bush with his 1,000 points of light? Why do we have a federal government? Why do we have a wealthy nation if we can't take care of people in a crisis? And it gets worse. All of these people who've lost their jobs, of course, lose their health insurance. And as a result, the government chooses this moment again to try to end the Affordable Care Act. At the same time, we know if you're affected by air pollution, you're going to get either more likely to get COVID-19, you're more likely to die from it because we need our lungs, we need them even more. At the same time, government slashing environmental protections while nobody's looking. This idea, this philosophy in the United States that small businesses and individuals can drown, but we will bail out the huge corporations, even the polluting corporations, the corporations causing the problem. And just a quick example, this relates more to climate, but who is causing the climate crisis? All of us, but the fossil fuel corporations clearly are the worst villains. They've lied to us. They've done all this propaganda. They're not the problem, knowing they're the problem. Around the world, the total subsidy each year to the fossil fuel corporations is over $5 trillion. It's about $5.2 trillion per year. So those we can afford to bail out. We bail out big banks when they've engaged in crazy activities that crash our economy. We bail out the car industry. We're going to probably bail out the airlines if we haven't already. I think we're bailing out yachts. I mean, yachts, both climate crisis, other environmental disasters, mistreatment of workers, and COVID-19. Sure, let's bail them out. And let's evict people who can't pay their rent. The kind, loving country of America. And again, it keeps getting worse. We see government officials making money off of the crisis. As opposed to prioritizing saving lives, they see where they can make a fast buck. We have been told that there is no alternative. Tina, we've been told that this is before coronavirus, they said this is the end of history. We have arrived at where we were meant to be. Economic growth, development has brought us to this amazing place. And we have vanquished socialism and communism. Capitalism is everywhere, except maybe North Korea and Bhutan. So this is it. This is where we're meant to be. If that's true, then I can't imagine anything more tragic. Of course, that's not true. It's not Tina, it's Tia. There is an alternative, and the alternative is the economics of well-being. It's very similar to what Pei mentioned, the tiny country of Bhutan, where rather than worrying about gross domestic product, GDP, they measure gross national happiness, which I would call gross national well-being. How well are people and our environment doing? So under the economics of well-being, or GNH, you don't just worry about environment on the side. You don't put economics as central and then glance over and see how the environment is holding up under all your economic growth. You actually put the environment in a central position, which kind of makes sense, given that we can't survive without the environment. Health, before COVID-19, we might have taken it a bit more for granted. I think these days we're much more aware of the importance of health. Well-being, meaning everything we need, not just to survive, but to thrive. So basic needs, and also happiness, not the happiness of consumption, but the happiness of being connected to your neighborhood, to your community, going out for your bicycle ride with your friends, going to a park and sitting under the trees, or going to that nice clean canal or river and taking a bath and drinking that clean water. People doing well in an environment that's doing well, that is where the priority should be. At the same time, you're going to establish equality. You can't have 100% equality. The term doesn't really mean anything, but you can certainly do vastly better than we're doing now. We need a floor, and we also need a ceiling. So the floor is, within each individual country, you establish what is the minimum basics that we consider a decent life for everyone. So what's a decent home? It depends on the climate. Kids are in school, you have the ability to stay healthy, but also access to healthcare, clothing, decent jobs. lack of, you're not terrified that you're going to lose your home or go hungry if you can't work for a couple days. That's your floor. And to achieve that floor, if you look at how many resources we have in the world, we have enough if we spread it more evenly. But as I said, you've got 8 people with as much wealth as half the population of the world. You cannot solve poverty without addressing excessive wealth. So that's the ceiling where you decide, and this is not something I'm going to put forward. This is should be a discussion, but you decide what's the maximum wealth anyone is allowed to have. And we don't have to look that far back to see where we actually did something like that. I think it was in the 1930s that we had 90% tax rate on the highest income or highest wealth. It's not income, it's well, stealing is what I would call it. But anyway, the wealthiest people were paying 90% in tax. So you can actually start to build your floor, put up your ceiling, and bring it as close as you can. It's actually possible if you were prioritizing that. To achieve that, government and civil society need to work together. This is something I've been happy to do a lot in Bangladesh. I've been promoting it in other countries. I do believe in government, but I don't believe in government without civil society holding them to their commitments, making sure they're actually acting in the interests of the public and worrying about the environment. Working together, it's then possible to support small businesses, to support the individuals who are struggling, to rein in those multinational corporations, to stop this insane over $5 trillion annually of subsidizing very corporations that are threatening our future. And you do this partly through strong social policies that support health, support childcare. We're talking about this with COVID-19. What do you do with your children? Housing, food, jobs. This isn't something crazy that no one's done. These are common practices throughout Scandinavia, Western Europe, Cuba. Formerly, they were very strong in Vietnam and Sri Lanka, parts of China and Kerala and India, and we see it in Canada. So that's plenty of countries. Basically, every industrialized country in the world does better than the United States on social policies. Again, talking about value, when we value well-being, we're going to stop putting so much value on production, especially of harmful products. So right now, when we measure GDP, we measure how well the country is doing. We're counting things like tobacco and weapons and sugary beverages that give us diabetes and make us sick, and fast food, junk food. We have a garden on our roof in our building. We grow some food. I basically grow most of the vegetables I eat. That has no economic value. I don't sell them. Brittany staying home to take care of her child, that has no economic value. If she pays someone to care for her child, that has value. So the joke is she could send her child to somebody, and that person could send her child to Brittany. They could take care of each other's children. That would count in GDP. But if they take care of their own children, that doesn't count. So you can see how crazy this is. And the things we truly value, the love and friendship and compassion and creativity, caring about people, volunteer work, none of that has economic value. So that whole idea of resilience, a resilient community where people know how their neighbors are doing and help them out. I have extra vegetables in my garden, you have extra fruit, let's trade. That's not good. That won't help GDP to go up. So you can see where the very logic of economics as we worship it at the altar of unbridled capitalism is causing these problems. So again, there is the alternative. The alternative in a pandemic, and alas, this will not be our last pandemic. We are going to have more. The response should be preparedness, not profit, and to bail out people, not corporations. When you say it, sounds pretty natural. Makes sense. Again, it's where common sense is uncommon. As we do all this, we have to seek ways to live more in harmony with nature. as I said, the environment and nature, they sustain us. It's not about us saving the environment. It's about allowing the environment to save us. So part of that, there's a lot of things involved, just very briefly. Right now, we've discovered how to reduce mobility. I personally was saying before we started, I was at 2 international conferences, and now I'm in Boise, Idaho, giving this talk. Been doing all this from my kitchen. We need to reduce mobility. That will help us to reduce air and noise pollution, reduce the traffic crashes. Traffic crashes alone kill over 1 million people a year and maim about 40 or 50 million. More people than that are killed each year by air pollution. So it's not, you're feeling it more now with the fires in California, but air pollution has been added actually as one of the 5 leading causes of non-communicable disease, which are the major causes of death. So air pollution, just that incredible thing of taking a breath can kill you, is becoming common, not just over in South Asia where we're used to this, but other parts of the world. And obviously, as we reduce mobility, we're going to bring down greenhouse gas emissions, again, building hope for our future. We're seeing this a bit with coronavirus, all the problems, but there's also some benefits. More people are growing their own foods, people are cycling more, people have, maybe not by choice, but they have more time with their families. We're learning to live a bit more simply for people, for planet, and for a healthy future. We need to take what's been good in coronavirus and incorporate it into our daily lives. If we ever get past coronavirus, we can't go back to the so-called normal. Normal was messed up. Normal's been messed up for quite a while. We need to find something better. We look at job loss, horrible job loss in the United States, in Bangladesh, millions and millions and millions of people losing their jobs. The question is, do we want them to return to the same jobs? A lot of us here today probably really love our jobs, but for most people on the planet, a job is how you survive. It's misery that you endure day after day. Really, is that the best we can do? And how do we create those jobs? Government subsidizes industry, creates pollution. The jobs don't pay decently. You see poverty, you have illness from the bad jobs. And in that course of the subsidy, the industry owners make more money. The workers are paid very little. We're just, again, increasing inequality. So what if we took a step back and said, okay, rather than deal with each incident separately, car crashes, seatbelts, air pollution, cleaner fuels, climate crisis, technology, coronavirus, mass, we can keep doing that and we will never get anywhere, never get to a better place, because each crisis we slightly reduce is then replaced by a new crisis. Instead, we could step back and reconsider what we want economics to do for us. What is it that we really value, and is what we value captured in economics as we view it today? So obviously, I would argue most of what we value is excluded. Most of what we should not value, things like prisons and weapons, are included. So what if we redefine prosperity so that rather than benefiting those 8 individuals or the handful of billionaires around the planet, it instead benefited the vast majority of people, with particular attention to groups that have been vulnerable, that have been left out, have been excluded from all the benefits of economic growth? What if we looked at economics and thought how to use it to cause less harm internationally, rather than exploiting and plundering other countries and their wealth, destroying the environment, treating the earth as something from which we will extract resources, just basically constantly raping Mother Earth? We respected the earth, we respected the rights of people to hold on to their resources rather than trying to steal them. What if we finally seriously addressed the multiple and interconnected crises of climate, inequality, and injustice? You can add others on there. If we actually reconfigured economics to do all that, and it could, there's no reason why it can't, we would become more resilient as individuals, as communities, as nations. If instead we keep tweaking at the edges, hoping for that technological breakthrough, whether it's a vaccine or a carbon capture method, or, oh my gosh, putting more pollutants in the atmosphere to block the sun, to reduce global warming. You know, we haven't done enough harm on this planet. Let's try to do even more. And I will have to add, without relying on billionaire philanthropists to save us, billionaire philanthropists are not going to save us because they are at the heart of the problem. They are benefiting from the economic growth, from the inequality. Why would they ever put forward a solution that makes the people who are suffering do better, that enables them to do better, that saves the environment? None of these billionaire philanthropists are going to put forward solutions that say, let's tax billionaires at 99%, let's pour money and really invest strongly, not in prisons, but in poor communities, stop redlining. If they benefit from all these things, they're not going to tell us to stop. So we can listen to Bill Gates, we can listen to Michael Bloomberg, and then say, thanks, we listened, and now we're doing it our way. The big question, of course, if we do agree to all this, or at least some of this, how do we get there? And I realize I'm talking to people in the United States. I'm trying to actually pay less attention to what's going on in the US because it's too depressing. This is when I would normally travel there, and I did not want to be there coming up with these elections coming up. I got my ballot, I'm voting online. Very happy to be voting from far, far away. So I understand there's a lot of cynicism and despair, but what I always tell myself, if I give up, I will make my enemies very happy. And if nothing else, just to anger my enemies, I refuse to give up. And the one time we lose, we are guaranteed to lose, is when we don't even try. As long as we try, there is hope. And when we give up and we just turn it over to the people who either wish to cause harm or don't realize that they're suffering from this system, that's when we truly do lose hope. So this may sound optimistic and idealistic, and I was telling some of the students I work with, I would much rather be an idealist than a realist. If a realist is someone who says, yeah, life is bad and that's how it is. I'm not there. I believe in working towards something better. The first step is to really reflect on our values. As people, as inhabitants of this planet, what do we value? We need to have these conversations. I had it recently with a group of university students from different countries, and one of them said, nobody has ever asked us, what do you value? They've always asked us, what job do you want? How do you make a lot of money? But no one asked us, what do you truly care about? And when I asked, what do you value? What makes you happy? Surprisingly, it wasn't going shopping. It was things like spending time with family and friends. So we need to cultivate our desire to be something other than merely consumers. There is this contrast between consumers and genuine citizens or genuine human beings. Citizen implies a legal status, which not everyone has where they live. But you can be a consumer, mostly concerned about what you buy, or you can be concerned about who you are living on this planet. How do you make a positive contribution to people around you now and to future generations? We need to work on shifting people's focus. And we need to have faith in the power of people like us, to bring about positive change. We need to cheer each other on. We need to rally together. There are so many examples where people working together have brought about positive change. I have lots of examples from my own work in Bangladesh and other countries in Asia. I've seen it. It's been recent wins, I think, against pipelines. There's been various places where indigenous people have managed to save their land from exploitation. There's been various positive things that have happened. So there are lots of true reasons to have hope. In terms of government, we need to educate our governments, push our governments to focus not on the opportunities to make more money, for usually the very wealthy, but rather on identifying the needs of people, the needs to save our environment, and really work on how do we do that. The United States saying it can't afford to have good environmental policies or to pay workers even when they can't work. Here I sit in Bangladesh, and it's insane. For the United States to plead poverty, you are laughable on the world stage for other reasons, but also for that. The United States saying you don't have enough money to solve these problems is crazy. We need to shift those subsidies away from fossil fuels and airlines and big banks and all of these other industries that destroy our environment and destroy our economy. Instead, government should focus on subsidizing things like organic food, education, parks and other public spaces, infrastructure for cycling and walking, feeding people, making sure everyone has decent food. You can have import replacement, labor-intensive jobs. Instead of always buying new products, what about repairing things that have broken? Heard stories about poor communities where people throw away a fairly new washing machine or dryer. It's broken. Nobody repairs those anymore. I live in a culture where everything gets repaired. The lid on my pot broke and I was so upset. It's my favorite pot, and I sent it out and someone fixed it for me. So that is much more labor intensive than building new products. It's much easier on the environment. You don't have to keep pulling out new resources from the planet, using electricity and water to create new products. Repair, creating jobs that way. Helping people develop skills for repair and for doing jobs in a beautiful way, making handmade shoes, handmade products. Imagine if our buildings were beautiful again. I walk through Manhattan sometimes and I look up and I just admire how beautiful the buildings are. And then I look at our buildings that are built for driving 50, 60 miles an hour and how hideously ugly so much of the United States is. Wouldn't it be nice to bring back aesthetics? It would be expensive because people would have to have jobs. You'd have artisans working. Why is that bad? Instead of paying everyone unemployment, why not pay them to restore our natural environments, restore our physical environments? Look back at the Civilian Conservation Corps from the Great Depression, the government paying people to do useful jobs, except this time let's include Black people. So focusing on jobs, decent jobs, not always on profits, focusing on needs, basic needs, not on wants. Our wants are unlimited, but our needs are actually limited, and we can create happiness not through stuff, but through, as I said, the communities, through friendship, through family, and having a bit more free time. So again, returning to the basics, better made products, less disposal, more repair, handcrafted beautiful things, more aesthetics, time for families, for community, time for ourselves to learn about these issues and share with our friends and talk about how to get there. When we make decisions, big decisions about budgeting, every single decision should talk about how does this affect climate? How does it affect the environment? How does it affect health and equality and well-being? So yeah, this industry will create 300 jobs, but how much pollution will it create? How much are you going to pay the workers? What was there before the industry came in, before the factory? Were there farmers? Were there fishermen? You're destroying them for the sake of a factory. No, how about making sure the fishermen or the farmers can survive? So when we talk about returning to normal, people have been on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years. Agriculture started about 5,000 years ago, and then we had cities. And somehow we managed to go along for quite a long time, hundreds of thousands of years, in times that were considered normal. Thousands of years of agriculture, so that could be considered normal. About half of all climate emissions have been emitted just in the last 30 years. So I would argue that on a proper human scale, the last 30 years are extremely abnormal. So we talk about returning to the normal that existed before coronavirus. I would say that's a return to an extremely abnormal, destructive, exploitative, and unequal time. We can't go back to that. That wasn't normal. We can't go back to that. we can move to something better when we realize that it's possible and fight for it. So our goals need to be much, much bigger. We need to be much more ambitious. We need to take multiple problems and look at solutions that address them together. Under that hashtag of Build Back Better, we need to see just how much better we can get excited about what that would mean for our lives, our children's and grandchildren's lives, lives of the other creatures on this planet who can't speak for themselves. Be ambitious, be vocal. We can create something much, much better. We can turn all of these disasters we are currently encountering into the incentive and opportunity to go to a much better place. And I hope that this talk will give you some incentive to help me work to get there. Thank you.
Clapping. A lot to think about. I see that people are reacting and maybe thinking about some of the things that you've said and internalizing them a bit. I am moderating questions. I see the chat room is kind of quiet at the moment while we think about things. So maybe I'll start the ball rolling, if that's okay with everyone, with a question that came up while I was listening, which is, from your perspective in Bangladesh, I'm wondering, and perhaps we can bring a Dr. Saleh Ahmed into the conversation as well. Do you see some aspects of Bangladeshi resilience that could perhaps be an example for us here in this country?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Pei. One of my colleagues in Nepal went to one of the COPs for climate, and he got a bit angry because North Americans and Western Europeans are talking about how much, great we are on environmental policies, whatever. And he said, okay, let's look at fuel per capita, water consumption per capita, how many resources we use per capita. He said Nepalis, and it could be Bangladeshis, we're very similar in those ways. We should be teaching people how to have a very low footprint. And I go to Nepal and I see children cycling in the streets freely, kids walking to school with no adults with them. Truly, in Newari architecture, there's a falcha in each community, which is a structure. So I'm talking about Nepal instead of Bangladesh. I will get to Bangladesh. There's a structure where every single community has to have this shelter, which in the daytime, it's usually men. Women are all working. Men have nothing to do. So the men are sitting there, older men, but they're there chatting with their friends. But the rule is, if you are traveling and you have nowhere to stay, you have no money, you can stay in the structure. So it's there as a community gathering place in the daytime, and at night, it's for anyone who needs a place to sleep. Also in Nepali architecture, you have some buildings around a courtyard. In the center of the courtyard is some sort of figure of a god. So you worship there. And what that means is you cannot destroy the courtyard because that is the place of worship. And that's your private courtyard. And then you go out and you have other public spaces throughout the town or the city where more people gather, and people's homes are tiny and they're dark. They're not very nice. They're not inside during the day. Home is where you sleep, like New York City. Home is for coronavirus. Home is where you sleep. In the daytime, you take your work. So you see women shelling keys or weaving, whatever they're doing. They're sitting out in a public space, chatting with other women, working together. And it is amazing. And I see these people, and they're poor. And of course, they would like to have, cleaner homes and nicer bathrooms, whatever. They'd like to have water. They don't get water, drinking water in their homes. Government doesn't provide water. But the happiness, the level of strength and resilience. And when that horrible earthquake hit many years ago, and people were terrified, even the ones who didn't lose their homes, they were terrified to go into their homes because when will the next earthquake? There were all these aftershocks. So people moved out, and they were living in these big open areas that they had left, because this is Nepal and you do that. And all these people living together, and it worked really well. It was a beautiful example of resilience. And I look at Bangladesh and I have repeatedly seen, okay, so I'm supposed to be avoiding people with coronavirus, but I go out and I play with community dogs and people gather and talk to me. And one of the reasons I've stayed in Bangladesh for over 20 years is community is so strong here. People are not individuals. They are members of families and they are members of community. And it's changing. We're the fastest growing in inequality. So the very wealthy, no, but the poor truly understand community and they build it wherever they go. And to be part of that, I am so honored. I am so happy to be able to experience true community and see how people build around each other. I've seen, if you're in a rickshaw and your scarf falls off and it's in danger of being caught in the axle, someone immediately shouts from another rickshaw, "Hey!" People are looking out for each other. And you know, people say to me, "Why don't you want to live in the US?" Yeah, no, thank you. Looking out for each other, seeing yourself not as an individual, how do I strive? How do I get ahead? How do I win? Seeing yourself as part of a community, and I have trouble because I'm a selfish American. So I don't do very well at it, but I love being part of that. I'm trying to learn, still trying to learn from others. You have food, you share it. You have a resource, you share it. It is beautiful. So yeah, people like Salah Ahmed, you're lucky to have him. And I hope he can bring some of that, the wealth of knowledge of resilience from these so-called poor communities. One of the beautiful expressions I've heard, by the way, you know, what do you call, I call them low consumption countries, which is a nice term. But also to the majority world, most of the world lives in places that understands and values community. The United States is a weird outlier. So if we can learn from these other countries, how do you really tap into the fact that none of us are self-sufficient? We all rely on each other, and that's good. But it's especially good when we really value and appreciate others and aren't always looking out for ourselves. We're looking out to protect our communities and our environments.
I have a question / comment. I don't actually really know what it is because it hasn't fully formed yet, but I guess, you know, I'm new to this world of resilience and community resilience and thinking about all the different ways to be resilient and how important equity and access to basic needs is in terms of building resilience. And you know, even with our Resilience Institute, we keep talking about it and we're working on projects, but sometimes it just feels so I don't know how to say it, insurmountable almost, to address such deeply ingrained cultural beliefs about what economic prosperity is, and really looking at, well, you know, but at what cost and how we address that. And I guess it doesn't stop me, just sometimes I feel a bit overwhelmed by it. And I don't know if maybe the work we're doing, where we're not focusing on how to make the US resilient, we're just focusing on, let's start here and let's work with our people and listen to them and work with our stakeholders that serve those people and maybe grow it out. I don't know if that's a model that can slowly someday percolate up to higher levels of government. I'm not a public policy person, but I'm learning. But the other thing too, I just, you know, we do have quite a few educators here as well. So I think, you know, we've got a responsibility to share this message and this philosophy with our students and listen to them as well. And so again, that really wasn't a question, I guess. It was just sort of things I was thinking about as I was listening. And it's really inspiring, Debra, your work and your words. And I guess if you have any additional words of wisdom or advice for those like me that are trying and just trying to keep it up, but also seeing this sort of massive Mount Everest in front of us that we have to climb over to get to that other side.
I totally relate to what you're saying, Brittany. I have it all the time where I always ask myself, is what I'm doing really important enough? Am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing something else that would be more valuable? What difference does it make? So you help 10 people or 20 people or 2,000 people, you know, there's billions of people on the planet. That's not a helpful way to look at things. So I realized if enough people, doesn't have to be that many. Like, I think it's something like 5% of the population or 15% of the population pushing for something can create change. We have managed to get laws changed in Bangladesh and get them changed and implemented with a handful of people, truly. So each of us who cares needs to make our piece. We can't worry about trying to fix the whole thing because it's too big. Years ago, when I was working on economics initially, I thought, okay, I need to do an international campaign, just kick out GDP. And I finally realized, A, there's other groups doing this, and B, no, I don't know how to do that. So just lower it a few notches there. But so one thing that helps is realizing there are so many people and groups that are taking on different pieces of this, and some of them are taking on very big pieces. I was at a conference on new economics, and I was delighted, a bit amused. People were saying, well, you know, in the post-capitalist world that we're living in, blah, blah. And I was like, wait, we're in the post-capitalist world now? I was a bit ambitious. Okay, optimistic, sure. I wish I could believe that. But it was beautiful to be around all these people who have just put the capitalism behind them, and they've moved on to what's better. So yeah, I think it's really important to say, okay, what is the piece that I can take on? What is the piece that I can achieve? So one of the things about my work is I think, well, I could have done something much more ambitious and gotten nowhere. I have friends who have spent 30, 40, 50 years working on one thing and not achieving it, and they've gotten pretty depressed. We've had a lot of successes, and those successes have reached, in our estimate, millions of people. Bangladesh is a big country, so it's easy to reach millions of people. That feels pretty good. So yeah, I'd like to do something bigger, but you know, let me achieve what I can. And by having a resilience institute that A, is helping locally, but B, is creating a model. So all of the things I'm doing, some of them are my own ideas, but most of it I've learned by reading. You watch videos, you go to conferences, and you hear a great talk, and it inspires you, and you take that home. And just in my own work, I was at a conference once where 6 or 7 people came up to me and thanked me for something I'd written. And I was so happy because each of the people thanked me for a different publication. And one of them, I was like, I didn't write that. He's like, yeah, you did. I'm like, oh, I don't remember that. And then I actually realized, oh yeah, it was so long ago, I completely forgotten about it. So sometimes we don't even realize the impact we've had. So I think just by being a force for good, there's that global karma, you know, am I putting out positive energy? Am I doing something good for the world? We don't know the effect it has. You guys are in a university, you're reaching students. And I think about the class I took on literature of social reflection when I was an undergrad, which as Kay knows was a good, 15, 20 years ago. You know, I'm still affected by that class. The professor, Robert Coles, he would not know that his class affected me. So that helps me when I think, okay, our actions often go much farther than we realize. I was telling somebody, I gave a talk a few days ago, and I was disappointed because there's almost nobody watching it on Zoom. And then person who hosted it said within an hour, it had gotten 800 views on Facebook. I wouldn't have known, but he kindly told me. So, you know, you put stuff out there, you do your piece. And to me, the one thing that is helpful is to be honest in your evaluation and say, am I actually achieving something? So I might be achieving more than I realize, but am I at least achieving something? So beating your head against the wall, I'm tempted often, not very helpful. But if we can actually put these ideas out there and create some local change, we know that we've done something. As part of our work, we do a lot of policy work, and it drives me insane because you can't see the results. It took 10 years to get the tobacco control law passed. You know, it took 10 years to get the government to start celebrating World Car Free Day. Like, it takes so bloody long. So we also do very local community events, and you see kids who are happy, or adults coming together, and they're smiling, and you've done something for them, and that gives me the strength to keep on going. Because I'm with you, it's super tough. And yeah, the other thing, sorry, just to say quickly, we need to ration the amount of time we spend watching the news. It's really important to have some idea of what's going on, but that is a black hole. You can get sucked in, and it's so easy to get depressed. When Trump was elected, I bought a punching bag, or actually I had somebody make me a punching bag. So the resource less intensive method. I started using a punching bag, but I got almost no work done for about 2 months. I was so depressed, I just couldn't function. And then I realized this is exactly what my enemies want, is for me to get knocked out. So when Brett Kavanaugh happened and I was ready to go through it again, I stopped myself. I said, you know what? You can be upset, but you can't let it stop you from working, because you are a force for good, and you can't let that force, the forces of evil, stop you, depress you. That is what part of their goal is, to make people who care depressed.
Here, here. You know, I see we have a question. I wanted to sort of follow on briefly and then ask a question from one of the things I think that we're having to do in this pandemic is reinvent community, or how it's done. And I would say that the HCRI, that has its Climate Resilience Institute, with its sort of gathering of data and sharing of data, has made me feel more of a feeling of community, of having something in common with people who track this, who pay attention to it, who are analyzing it and putting it out there. So it might be that, you know, we can't do as much sort of community gathering as we're used to, especially those of us who are over a certain age and are used to doing this in person more. On the other hand, just the communication aspect, I think, of an institute like the HCRI really cannot be overestimated. So we do have a question here that reads as follows. We have the Resilience Institute on our campus, Boise State, I presume here. Are they, or we, working with the gross national well-being in mind?
Guess
and I
that
guess that's maybe
might be more for
question.
me. Well, I just learned. Yeah, I mean, you know, the idea of gross national well-being, the first time I've heard that was tonight. But a lot of what Debra was talking about are the types of things that we are trying to address. So for example, right now we've got a planning grant a proposal we submitted to NSF that models resilience. Well, what do we mean by modeling resilience? Well, how people have done it nationally is they use census data and they say, well, people of color and people with low socioeconomic status, they're vulnerable, so they have low resilience. And they're sort of just blanket assuming things about, and probably to some extent it's useful material, and then they're using the data that's out there and available, and they're looking at county-wide data. But what we want to do is work with our stakeholders, develop relationships, and have our local community tell us what those variables are that determine our resilience. Right? So rather than kind of coming top down, we want to work with our community bottom up and say, what variables would you use to measure resilience for Ada County? And not just Ada County, but thinking about the individual communities within Ada County. Boise State is an individual community within Ada County, and our resilience is different than maybe the resilience of the city of Boise, right? But how do we explore that? How do we measure it? And what goes into it? And it's more than just the intersection of hazards and built environment. It's also everything that Debra was talking about with assessing access to basic needs and healthcare and affordable housing and food, and social connectedness is so important. How do we measure that? What do we have here that can really assess that? And working with our community to identify those variables and identify those local data sets so that we can build a better picture of where we are and where we want to be. But not only creating that, but finding a way to work with our city officials, our county officials, our state officials at the very beginning to understand how they work, what's important to them, what kind of data they would actually need to make policy change, so that as we're developing our project and getting our results, then we share that with them in a meaningful way and work together to create more of a resilient strategy locally and regionally. So a lot of what Debra is talking about tonight are things that we were already kind of doing, but I didn't have like the actual term for it. So thank you for all that. And I hope that helps. Tiffany, if you want to chat at all about the types of things we're doing, I'm happy to. We could set up a meeting some other time if you'd like. And yes, this is being recorded and will be publicly available.
If you allow me, then I might actually add a few points, as Brittany was saying. I think like HCRI has started to do work related to gross national happiness. Like, just think this way, like if we have like capital-driven society, which is like our contemporary society, and gross national happiness like Bhutan, like if we think this as a complete road. To make the progress from capital-driven society, we have to understand and identify what are causing like non-happiness, what are causing injustice or inequality, that kind of stuff. So I think like we have already started to do some research. Particularly, we also actually hired a PhD student on equitable resilience. So we are not just trying to define resilience in scientific term, but also how it can relate to the society. So I think like eventually, like even though that is not explicitly we are saying at this moment, but we are actually aiming to have kind of like a direction which can actually say like it's a more inclusive society or inclusive strategy to promote resilience. And you know, like with our like all ongoing stresses, like whenever we talk about resilience, it could be environmental, could be economic, it could be like public health crisis and all these things. We can only have resilience in that term if we have inclusive and if we consider the people who are marginalized, particularly through our like ongoing economic system. So I would say like ACRI is addressing, maybe not like using the term, but it's actually addressing the top issue. Yeah.
I can just add quickly, one of the things I'm really enjoying here is you have to have fun. So I should add this. Part of how you keep motivated is by, you can tell, I'm not very good at being unhappy. I'm a joyous person. I need to have fun. I hired various people with disabilities, and we also work with transgender people. And we had to put that on hold with COVID-19, but it's actually been so much fun because transgender people are, they're just so much more out there than typical, sorry, Sada, but typical Bangladeshis who can be a bit conservative. And they're also a really excluded group. So they are so happy to be included, but they also bring another level of joyousness into our interactions. And when I bring together, I would have like this African athlete who's working here with, you know, it's a very tiny woman with a hunchback and a transgender person, and we're dancing together and they're hugging, and we've got these university students who at first you're kind of like, what's going on? One day we had this young deaf woman who said, I don't like transgender people because they are very pushy when they beg. By the end of this 2-hour interaction, she was basically wrapped around them. This is before COVID-19. She was wrapped around them taking pictures. And that's part of what I said about you have to do things that you can see at the moment to keep you motivated, but also having fun. And I always tell my students, you know, I've been doing this, I'm joking obviously about my age, I've been doing this for decades. How do I stay motivated? We have so much fun in the office. I'm crazy. I bring in this level of creativity and fun, and we bring this into our work. We don't solve problems by going after them the same ways. And to be creative, you have to laugh. When we laugh, we are more creative. We also have more energy, more enthusiasm for the work. And when you look at these horrible things and you get depressed, you gotta step away and find some source of joy and happiness and in yourself and bringing it to others. But again, that's part of resilience is, you know, here we are taking some of the most excluded people in society, bringing them into our circle, and we laugh together. And, you know, of course they love that. And we have learned ways. We are adapting with COVID-19. So we're doing a lot of webinars. People love it because they get to speak. A lot of us love to talk. But, you know, getting attention. People who are normally excluded becoming included, and then that happiness that they bring, and that boosts you, and you're achieving your goals, but also, you know, keeping your motivation up. So yeah, put on some good music. Watch Billy Porter performing at the end of the first night of DNC. I watch that like every day, 3 times a day. I love that video so much. You know, find the things that make you happy and share that with others. And it's actually part of your job. Oh, hey, I'm promoting happiness. But do it with people who are excluded, as opposed to, you know, party with the rich people. Let's party with the people who are excluded in society and learn from them. And you can learn a lot in these social interactions about what's going on in people's lives. It's not all about sitting around talking about your problems. It's also what gives you joy. How do we share the joy together? And from that, we build resilience.
That's
rock and roll.
So true. We now have our marching orders. Oh, does anyone else have
dancing orders?
Dancing orders? Does anyone else? I mean, actually, I like the mixture here that we're talking about things that can be quantified, versus things that are a little more qualitative, perception-related things. For example, you can ask somebody, hey, on a scale of 1 to 5, how happy are you today? That's data too, even though it's very hard to actually say, you know, on what do you base that, you know. But it's like, how happy do you feel today? You know, I think that there are ways to sort of blend sort of perception things or qualitative things that are not quite as, you know, numberable with things that are numberable. So for example, I read a really fascinating article about birth weight, baby birth weight, and how it was correlated with the amount of trees in a neighborhood. And I was like, how does that work? How is it that trees increase the birth weight of babies? How does that work? You know, these are the kinds of things that, this is where you actually go and ask the moms, you know, or where you start actually getting things about perception, self-perception or perception of others, that might actually sort of give real, like, breathe life into the numbers. You know, we can actually say, okay, what is our percentage of shade cover? We can actually look at a GIS map or something like that and look at that. Or we can say, what was the air quality index, you know, that day for the wildfire smoke, and blend that with some of these other sorts of more messy, but still really valuable kinds of information that people are feeling and thinking themselves. And I mean, you know, I know that there's been some work done by the HCRI on how prepared people feel versus how prepared they actually are, and how that can actually be an issue because you have a gap and some people get an unpleasant surprise. On the other hand, I think if there's optimism and confidence, that actually has a role too. It's like, well, maybe I need some more of these things, but I'm otherwise pretty well prepared and I'm ready, you know, like. I just think that's very interesting, and it seems to be playing out in very nuanced ways with regard to the pandemic. It's like, how vulnerable do you feel versus how vulnerable are you actually? So I should. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, can I just say something quickly? Sorry. One of the things I love about GNH that Bhutan developed, you know, we take GDP, it's one number divided across the whole population. So it says nothing about inequality, which groups are left out. So GNH, it's lots of numbers because they do measure things, but some of the things they measure, like how much sleep do you get a night? How many hours do you work in the day? And they don't just take the whole number and average it across the population. They actually look at which group is deprived in which aspect. So for instance, big surprise, which group works more than 8 hours a day? Women. And then they say, okay, one of our goals is to ensure that women don't have to work so many extra hours. So rather than just averaging and say, on average, it's fine, they actually look at that group. So community cohesion in Bhutan is mostly really good, but if you happen to live in the capital of Thimphu, it's lower. So they don't just say, well, overall, we're doing great. They say, we need to address community cohesion in Thimphu. So I find it beautiful because I think it's, I don't remember exactly, it was something like 7 pillars, 36 measures. It's quite extensive, and it includes things like, you know, are you fluent in your local language? They actually include things like religion, because that's important to them, but cultural, do you know about your own culture? They include the things that they consider important. There's obviously things on environment, you know, all kinds of different measures, health, whatever. But I love the fact that they actually are concerned about which group is left out on any of the measures, and they try to address that. So I think that's a huge lesson in other countries. You know, overall, are we okay on resilience? Well, who cares if we're overall okay? The important thing is which groups are left out and how do we address that? How do we identify that? And yeah, I think there's lots of things we could measure if we wanted to. We actually did a measurement of the economic value of women's household work. It was incredibly difficult, but we did it and it came out to be more than GDP in Bangladesh. You can be a bit creative in coming up with some of these numbers. And you know, you ask people, I think it's not, are you happy to, one is how are you happy today, but I think the question is something like, are you overall satisfied with your life? So I think the National Happiness Survey, or the International Happiness Survey, they ask questions like that. And it actually, you know, are you happy today might be something that just happened today, but overall are you satisfied? And they've discovered that one actually does chart quite well with how people are feeling. So there's lots of ways you can do this, and a lot of it's been developed. It's not, you know, we don't have to develop it all new, which always makes me feel better. Like the amount of work needs to be done. Okay, there's lots of people doing lots of things. What's my piece?
So actually, we have time for maybe one more question. Does anybody have a question for Debra while she's on?
No, I just want to say it's a wonderful talk. So thank you very much for giving this talk. Like, it's really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I actually have a comment from Brittany. If trees make you happy, they would lower cortisol levels equals healthier babies, maybe. So, I mean, I think that maybe some of this seems to come together with things involving stress, which is measurable with cortisol levels. And maybe that's a way to sort of start bridging these areas of these sort of domains of knowledge is you know, can we actually sort of see what things stress people out? More trees, less sleep, too much work, too much time in a vehicle, sugary drinks and tobacco. I mean, all of these things actually probably can be pretty concrete aspects of happiness. And happiness, I think, is a key to resilience in ways that we're just beginning to understand, it seems to me. So I'm going to stop yakking because this is so interesting. And I'm going to turn things back over to Brittany for our closeout.
Sorry, I had to step away. I had to say goodnight to my daughter. Speaking of happiness and low stress levels. So she was very curious because my headphone was beeping, I guess, and it was blinking light. And I went into her bedroom to give her a hug. And she's like, what is that light? I think I scared her more than anything. Anyway, Debra, this was wonderful. I learned a lot. I'm inspired, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I know that it's very early for some and quite late for others, but I really appreciate everybody's time. And again, if anybody has questions or ideas for the HCRI, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to meet with you or converse via email. And I think, I bet you if you emailed Debra and asked her some follow-up questions, she'd be happy to answer as well. So just want to, again, thank Debra for being here and give her a round of virtual applause.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, please get in touch through the Institute of Wellbeing. I'm easy to find. My name is pretty unusual, so it's not too hard to find me.
And we can always help. We can help bridge that.
Yeah.
Keep up the fabulous work.
Yes, thank you.
And thanks to the HCRI.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting me.
Goodbye.
All right, good night, everybody. Thank you, or
Bye.
good morning to some of you. Have a good day.
Stop recording.
All right, well, thank you, Debra.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was really fun.
Yeah, it was really good. Very, very inspiring. It's, yeah, makes my heart happy. So have a great day.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Have a good night. Bye.
Thanks.